The stars looked different from this part of the galaxy. Commander Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck of the New Horizon, watching the blue-green planet of SciFiPrime grow larger in the viewscreen. 3 months of travel through hyperspace had brought them to this moment, and Jake felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. This mission could change everything for humanity. Behind him, Dr. Lisa Parker was reviewing her notes about the Zentari species for the 100th time. Her fingers moved quickly across the digital tablet, checking facts about their biology, culture, and social structure. She had spent years studying alien life forms, but the Zentari were unlike anything she had encountered before. They were a proud warrior race with crystalline skin that changed colors based on their emotions. Their society was built around honor, combat, and strict social rules that had remained unchanged for thousands of years. Lieutenant Ben Carter was busy at the communications station, running final checks on the translation systems. The Zentari language was complex, with subtle tones and gestures that could completely change the meaning of a sentence. One wrong word could turn a friendly greeting into a deadly insult. Ben had worked with the best linguists on Earth to prepare for this moment, but he still felt nervous about the responsibility. Captain Amy Roberts paced the bridge, her military training evident in every step. She had studied every available report about Zentari customs and protocols. As the cultural advisor, she would be responsible for helping the team navigate the complex social rules of their hosts. The Zentari valued strength and honor above all else, and any sign of weakness could be seen as an insult. The New Horizon was not the largest ship in the human fleet, but it was equipped with the most advanced diplomatic facilities. The crew of 50 had been carefully selected for their skills and temperament. Everyone understood that this mission was about more than just first contact. The Zentari Confederation controlled key shipping routes and resources that humanity needed for expansion into this part of the galaxy. Jake turned from the viewscreen and walked to the center of the bridge. His uniform was crisp and clean, every detail perfect. He had served in the military for 15 years, but this was his first diplomatic mission. The brass had chosen him because of his reputation for staying calm under pressure and his ability to think quickly in dangerous situations. He hoped those skills would be enough. The approach to SciFiPrime was carefully planned. The New Horizon would enter orbit and wait for permission to send down a shuttle. The Zentari had agreed to this meeting, but their message had been formal and brief. Jake wondered what they were really thinking about this first contact with humans. Dr. Parker looked up from her tablet and walked over to Jake. Her brown hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her green eyes showed both excitement and worry. She had dreamed of this moment since she was a child, but now that it was here, she felt overwhelmed by the possibilities and dangers. "Commander, I've been thinking about their greeting customs," she said quietly. "The Zentari have very specific rules about how different ranks should interact. We need to be extremely careful about our body language and tone of voice." Jake nodded. He had read her reports many times, but he appreciated her dedication to getting every detail right. "What's your biggest concern, Doctor?" Lisa glanced around the bridge before answering. "Their concept of honor is tied to their social hierarchy. Any action that could be seen as challenging their authority might be taken as an insult. And insults among the Zentari are often settled through combat." The thought of combat made Jake uncomfortable. He was trained for battle, but this mission was supposed to be about peace and cooperation. The last thing he wanted was to accidentally start a fight with their potential allies. Ben Carter called out from his station. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the planet. They're giving us permission to enter orbit and prepare for the diplomatic meeting." Jake walked over to the communications station. The voice coming through the speakers was deep and melodious, with an accent that sounded almost musical. The translation system was working perfectly, but Jake could hear the underlying tones that suggested formality and caution. "This is High Commander Zethkar of the Zentari Defense Force," the voice said. "Your ship is granted permission to orbit our world. You may send down a shuttle with your diplomatic team at the designated coordinates. We will meet you at the capital city spaceport." Jake picked up the microphone. "This is Commander Jake Morrison, of the human vessel New Horizon. We are honored by your welcome and look forward to meeting with your people. We will arrive at the designated time." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Jake could feel the tension in the air. Everyone knew that the next few hours would determine the future of human Centauri. Relations. Captain Roberts stepped forward. "Commander, I recommend we stick to the planned protocol. Keep the initial meeting short and formal. Let them take the lead in conversations. Show respect for their customs, but don't appear weak or submissive." Jake appreciated her advice. Amy had studied military cultures across the galaxy, and her insights had been valuable during the preparation phase. But he also knew that no amount of preparation could account for every possible situation they might encounter. The shuttle bay was busy with activity as the diplomatic team prepared for departure. Jake wore his dress uniform with all his medals and ribbons clearly visible. The Centauri respected military achievement, and his decorations would help establish his credentials as a leader worth their attention. Dr. Parker had changed into formal civilian clothes that projected competence and intelligence. She carried a small case with gifts from Earth, carefully chosen to show respect without appearing to offer tribute. The balance was delicate, and she hoped they had chosen correctly. Lieutenant Carter and Captain Roberts completed the team, both wearing their military dress uniforms. The four of them represented humanity's best hope for establishing a lasting alliance with the Centauri Confederation. As the shuttle descended through the atmosphere of SciFiPrime, Jake looked out at the alien landscape below. The cities were built from crystalline materials that reflected the sunlight in beautiful patterns. The architecture was both elegant and imposing, showing the artistic sensibility and military strength of the Centauri people. The spaceport was larger than anything Jake had seen on human worlds. Dozens of ships from across the galaxy were docked at various terminals, proof of the Centauri's importance in interstellar trade and politics. The New Horizons shuttle looked small and insignificant among the massive vessels. As they walked down the shuttle ramp, Jake got his first close look at the Centauri people. They were tall and graceful, with skin that looked like living crystal. Their clothes were practical but elegant, and they moved with the confidence of a warrior race. The delegation waiting to greet them was impressive, with military uniforms that showed their rank and achievements. High Commander Zethkar stepped forward to greet them. He was older than Jake had expected, with silver traces in his crystalline skin that spoke of wisdom and experience. His daughter, Princess Veltara, stood beside him. She was young but carried herself with the authority of someone born to lead. The formal greetings went smoothly, with both sides following diplomatic protocol. Jake felt cautiously optimistic as they were escorted to the government complex for the first official meeting. The Centauri seemed genuinely interested in learning about humanity and exploring possibilities for cooperation, but as they entered the magnificent building that served as the planetary capital, Jake could not shake the feeling that they were walking into something far more complex and dangerous than anyone had anticipated. The formal meetings had gone better than Jake expected. For 3 days, the human delegation had worked with High Commander Zethkar and his advisors to discuss trade agreements, shared technology, and mutual defense pacts. The Centauri were intelligent and practical, asking detailed questions about human capabilities and offering information about their own civilization. Dr. Parker had been particularly impressed by their scientific achievements. The Centauri had developed faster than light travel, centuries before humans, and their medical technology was far advanced. They had also mastered the art of crystal cultivation, growing the materials they needed for their cities and ships from special mineral deposits on their world. Lieutenant Carter had established good working relationships with the Centauri communications staff. The translation systems were working perfectly, and he had learned enough of their language to handle basic conversations without technological help. The Centauri seemed to appreciate his effort to learn their customs. Captain Roberts had spent hours studying Centauri military organization and tactics, She was fascinated by their warrior culture, which emphasized personal honor alongside practical military skills. Every Zentari citizen received basic combat training, and their military leaders were chosen based on proven ability rather than political connections, but it was the evening of the third day that everything changed. High Commander Zethkar had invited the human delegation to a formal dinner in the Great Hall of the government complex. The room was magnificent, with crystal walls that caught and reflected light in beautiful patterns. Long tables were arranged in a specific order that reflected the social hierarchy of Zentari society. Jake and his team had been given places of honor near the head table, where Princess Veltara sat with her father and other high-ranking officials. The princess had been present at most of the meetings, but Jake had not had much opportunity to speak with her directly. She was younger than he had expected, probably in her late 20s by human standards, but she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had been trained to lead from childhood. The dinner began with formal toasts and speeches. Jake gave a brief address thanking the Zentari for their hospitality and expressing hope for future cooperation. His words were translated carefully, and he was pleased to see approving colors flash across the crystalline skin of their hosts. The food was exotic but delicious, with flavors that reminded Jake of earth spices mixed with something completely alien. Dr. Parker was fascinated by the variety of dishes, taking careful notes about the ingredients and preparation methods. The Zentari seemed pleased by her interest in their cuisine. As the evening progressed, Jake began to relax. The conversations were flowing naturally, with both sides sharing stories and asking questions about each other's cultures. He felt that real friendships were beginning to form between the human and Zentari delegations. It was during the main course that disaster struck. Jake was engaged in an animated discussion with one of the Zentari military commanders about space combat tactics, when he noticed a particularly interesting-looking dish being served at the center of the table. Without thinking, he reached across the table to serve himself a portion. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Every Zentari in the room fell silent, their crystalline skin flashing bright red colors that Jake had never seen before. Princess Veltara's face went rigid with shock, and her father's expression darkened with anger. Jake realized immediately that he had made a terrible mistake, but he did not understand what he had done wrong. Dr. Parker grabbed his arm, her face pale with fear. Lieutenant Carter was frantically checking his cultural database, trying to understand what had happened. Captain Roberts was already calculating escape routes, her military training kicking in automatically. High Commander Zethkar stood slowly, his movements deliberate and controlled. When he spoke, his voice was cold and formal, completely different from the warm tone he had used throughout the evening. "Commander Morrison," he said, his words carrying clearly through the silent hall, "you have committed a grave breach of protocol. By reaching for food before Princess Veltara, you have challenged her authority and insulted her honor." Jake felt his heart sink. He had read about Zentari customs, but in the relaxed atmosphere of the dinner he had forgotten the strict rules about social hierarchy. Among the Zentari, the order in which people were served food reflected their status in society. By serving himself before the princess, he had essentially declared himself superior to her. "I apologize," Jake said quickly. "I meant no disrespect. I was not thinking about protocol." But his apology only made things worse. Several Zentari military officers stood up, their hands moving toward their weapons. The princess raised her hand to stop them, but her crystalline skin was now glowing with angry red patterns that spoke of deep offense. "Among our people, princess," Veltara said, her voice steady but cold, "honor cannot be restored with mere words. You have challenged my authority in front of my subjects. According to our ancient laws, this insult must be answered with action." Dr. Parker stepped forward, her voice urgent. "Princess, please understand that Commander Morrison is not familiar with all your customs. He would never intentionally insult you or your people." The princess looked at her with what might have been sympathy, but her expression remained firm. "I believe you speak truthfully, Doctor, but the law is clear. When one person challenges another's honor, the matter must be Settled through combat. There is no other way. Jake felt the blood drain from his face. He had read about Zentari dueling customs, but he had never imagined he would be forced to participate in one. The Zentari were skilled warriors who trained in combat from childhood. He was a competent soldier, but he had no chance against princes who had been raised as a warrior. "I accept your challenge," Jake said, knowing he had no choice. To refuse would not only end the diplomatic mission, but would brand him as a coward in the eyes of the Zentari people. Princess Valtara nodded, her expression showing what might have been regret. "The duel will take place tomorrow at dawn in the Grand Arena. You may choose your weapons from the traditional options, and you will be given appropriate armor. The combat will continue until one of us yields or is unable to continue." High Commander Zethkar's voice was heavy with disappointment. "I had hoped for a different outcome to these negotiations, Commander Morrison, but the law must be followed. If you survive the duel, we can continue our discussions. If not, your people will need to send a new delegation." The dinner ended abruptly, with the Zentari delegates filing out in silence. Jake and his team were escorted to their quarters, where they spent the night in desperate preparation. Dr. Parker researched everything she could find about Zentari combat techniques. Lieutenant Carter tried to contact Earth for instructions, but the distance was too great for real-time communication. Captain Roberts helped Jake practice basic defensive moves, but they all knew it would not be enough. As dawn approached, Jake realized that he was about to face not only the possibility of death, but the complete failure of humanity's first diplomatic mission to the Zentari. One moment of carelessness had turned a promising alliance into a potentially fatal confrontation. The weight of responsibility felt heavier than ever as Jake prepared to enter the Grand Arena, knowing that the future of human-Zentari relations might depend on the outcome of a duel he had no realistic chance of winning. The Grand Arena was even more impressive than Jake had imagined. The circular structure was carved from living crystal, with walls that rose high into the morning sky. Thousands of Zentari had gathered to witness the duel, their crystalline skin reflecting the sunlight in brilliant patterns. The arena floor was smooth and polished, providing perfect footing for combat. Jake stood in the preparation chamber, adjusting the unfamiliar armor that had been provided for him. The protective gear was lighter than human military equipment, but seemed strong enough to deflect most weapons. Dr. Parker, Lieutenant Carter, and Captain Roberts stood nearby, their faces showing worry and determination. "Remember what we practiced?" Captain Roberts said quietly. "Keep your distance, use your mobility, and look for openings. Don't try to match her strength directly." Dr. Parker handed him a small communication device. "This will let us stay in contact during the fight. If you need medical attention, we'll be ready." Lieutenant Carter had been studying the arena's acoustics. "The crowd will be loud, but I can relay information about her movements if you need it. Just stay focused on her, not the audience." Jake nodded, grateful for his team's support. He had spent the night studying everything they could find about Princess Valtara's fighting style. She was known for her speed and precision, favoring quick strikes over brute force. Her weapon of choice was a traditional Zentari blade that could extend and retract at will. The weapon master approached with Jake's chosen equipment. He had selected a simple plasma sword, the closest thing to human military weapons available. The energy blade hummed softly as he activated it, casting a blue glow on the chamber walls. "It is time," the weapon master announced. "The princess awaits you in the arena." Jake took a deep breath and walked through the tunnel that led to the arena floor. The sound of the crowd grew louder with each step, and he could feel the weight of thousands of eyes upon him. This was not just a duel between two individuals, but a test of human courage in the face of Zentari justice. Princess Valtara was already waiting in the center of the arena. She wore traditional ceremonial armor that gleamed like liquid metal, and her crystalline skin showed the golden colors of determination and battle readiness. Her weapon was a masterwork of Zentari craftsmanship, its blade shimmering with energy patterns that seemed to flow like water. High Commander Zethkar stood at the judge's position, his expression grave and formal. His voice carried clearly across. the arena as he announced the rules of combat to the assembled crowd. "This duel is sanctioned by ancient law," he declared. "Princess Veltara of the Royal House challenges Commander Jake Morrison of the human delegation for the crime of insulting her honor. The combat will continue until one participant yields or is unable to continue. Let the duel begin." The crowd fell silent as Jake and Princess Veltara faced each other across the arena floor. Jake could see the intelligence in her eyes, calculating and measuring him as an opponent. He raised his weapon in a gesture of respect, which she returned with a slight nod. The princess moved first, her attack coming faster than Jake had expected. Her blade extended to twice its normal length, forcing him to leap backward to avoid the strike. The crowd cheered as she pressed her advantage, her movements flowing like liquid mercury. Jake found himself on the defensive immediately, using his plasma sword to block and parry her attacks. The princess was incredibly skilled, her blade work demonstrating years of training and natural talent. She seemed to anticipate his moves before he made them, always staying one step ahead. The duel settled into a rhythm of attack and defense. Princess Veltara would launch a series of quick strikes, probing for weaknesses in Jake's guard. He would respond with defensive moves, trying to create enough space to launch his own attacks. The crowd responded to each exchange, their crystalline skin flashing with colors that reflected their excitement. Jake began to notice something interesting about the princess's fighting style. Despite her aggressive attacks, she seemed to be holding back slightly. Several times she had clear opportunities to land decisive blows, but she pulled back at the last moment. Her skin colors also seemed conflicted, showing flashes of emotions he could not identify. The physical demands of the fight were beginning to tell. Jake's human endurance was good, but the princess seemed tireless. Her alien physiology gave her advantages in speed and recovery that he could not match. Sweat dripped from his forehead as he continued to defend against her relentless assault. As the duel progressed, Jake tried to implement some of the tactics Captain Roberts had taught him. He used his mobility to change position frequently, making it harder for the princess to predict his movements. He also varied his defensive patterns, sometimes blocking high and sometimes low. The crowd's energy was building with each exchange. The Zentari loved combat, and they were witnessing a display of skill from their princess that impressed even veteran warriors. But Jake could also sense their growing impatience. They expected the human to fall quickly, and his stubborn resistance was prolonging the inevitable. Princess Veltara seemed to sense the crowd's mood. Her attacks became more aggressive, forcing Jake to give ground steadily. He found himself being pushed toward the arena wall, his options for movement becoming limited. The princess's blade work was now a blur of motion, each strike perfectly placed to drive him further into the corner. Jake realized that he was losing the duel. His defensive strategy had worked for a while, but the princess's superior skill and endurance were beginning to show. He needed to do something unexpected if he wanted to survive the next few minutes. In a moment of desperation, Jake tried to go on the offensive. He launched a series of attacks that forced the princess to defend herself, but she adapted quickly to his new strategy. Her counterattacks were even more dangerous now as she used his forward momentum against him. The crowd sensed that the end was near. Their voices rose in anticipation as Princess Veltara maneuvered Jake into a position where he had few options left. Her blade work was now purely offensive, each strike designed to end the fight. Jake found himself backed against the arena wall, his plasma sword barely able to keep up with the princess's attacks. He could see the determination in her eyes, but also something else that he had not expected. There was no hatred there, no desire for revenge. She was simply following her duty as a Zentari warrior. The princess raised her weapon for what appeared to be the final strike. The crowd held its breath, waiting for the moment when the human would fall. Jake knew that his next move would determine not only his fate but the future of relations between their two species. In that crucial moment, with the princess's blade descending toward him, Jake made a decision that would change everything. Instead of raising his weapon in a futile defense, he chose to do something that no Zentari had ever done in the history of their civilization. Jake dropped his plasma sword. The weapon clattered to the arena floor, its blue glow fading as it powered down. Princess Veltara's blade was already in motion, descending toward him with deadly precision. The crowd was on its feet, expecting to see the human fall in the next instant. Instead of raising his hands to defend himself or cowering in fear, Jake did something that stunned everyone in the arena. He opened his arms wide and stepped forward, pulling the surprised princess into a gentle embrace. Her weapon stopped just inches from his shoulder as she found herself wrapped in his arms. The entire arena fell into complete silence. 20,000 Zentari warriors, diplomats, and citizens sat in shocked disbelief. Never in their recorded history had anyone done such a thing during a formal duel. Their culture had no reference point for this action, no way to understand what they were witnessing. Princess Veltara's crystalline skin began to shift through colors that had never been seen before. The golden hues of battle readiness faded, replaced by soft blues and purples that seemed to flow like water across her features. Her weapon fell from her grasp, landing on the arena floor with a metallic ring that echoed through the silence. Jake held her gently but firmly, his arms providing protection rather than restraint. He could feel her trembling slightly, not from fear but from the shock of experiencing something completely outside her understanding. Her crystalline skin felt warm against his chest, and he could sense her rapid heartbeat. "I'm sorry, Jake," whispered softly, his voice barely audible to anyone but the princess. "I never meant to insult you or your people. In my culture, when someone is hurt or angry, we offer comfort, not more violence." The princess pulled back slightly to look at his face, her eyes wide with confusion and something else that might have been wonder. Her skin continued to shift through new colors, creating patterns that even she did not recognize. The embrace had lasted only seconds, but its impact was profound. High Commander Zethkar stood frozen at the judge's position, his mouth open in shock. The ancient laws of combat provided no guidance for this situation. How should he interpret an action that transformed deadly combat into something that resembled affection? His own skin was flashing through rapid color changes as he struggled to process what he had witnessed. Dr. Parker, Lieutenant Carter, and Captain Roberts watched from the sidelines in amazement. They had expected Jake to make a desperate final attack or perhaps try to negotiate a surrender. None of them had anticipated this response. But as they watched the princess's reaction, they began to understand the genius of Jake's instinctive choice. The crowd remained silent, but their skin colors showed a storm of emotions. Some flashed angry red, outraged at this breach of sacred combat protocol. Others showed curious yellow hues, intrigued by this unprecedented display. Still others glowed with soft colors that suggested they were moved by the unexpected tenderness they had witnessed. Princess Veltara slowly stepped back from Jake's embrace, her movements uncertain. Her entire worldview had been built around the concepts of strength through combat and honor through victory. But this human had shown her a different kind of strength, one that chose vulnerability over aggression. "What have you done?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is not how warriors behave. This is not how duels are fought." Jake kept his hands open and visible, showing that he meant no threat. "You're right, it's not how warriors usually behave. But maybe that's the problem. Maybe there are times when being a warrior means choosing to protect instead of destroy." The princess looked down at her fallen weapon, then back at Jake's face. Her crystalline skin was now showing colors that no Zentari had ever displayed before, soft warm hues that seemed to glow from within. She was experiencing emotions that her culture had never acknowledged or named. "In my world," she said slowly, "strength means the ability to defeat your enemies. Power comes from victory in combat. Honor is earned through conquering others." Jake shook his head gently. "In my world, we've learned that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is choose not to fight. Sometimes the most powerful action is to show care for someone, even when they're angry with you." The crowd was beginning to stir, their silence breaking into murmurs of confusion and debate. Some were calling for the duel to continue, insisting that the combat must be completed according to law. Others seemed uncertain, as if they were seeing their own culture from a new perspective. High Commander Zethkar finally found his voice. Princess, you must complete the duel. The law demands it. This human has not yielded, and you have not achieved victory. Princess Veltara looked at her father, then at Jake, then at the thousands of spectators surrounding them. Her skin was now glowing with the soft colors that had never been seen in Zentari history. She was experiencing something that felt like a fundamental shift in her understanding of the world. Father, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the arena, I cannot complete this duel. The crowd erupted in shocked exclamations. High Commander Zethkar's skin flashed bright red with anger and confusion. You cannot abandon your honor, daughter. The law is clear. The princess picked up her weapon and held it for a moment, feeling its familiar weight. Then she set it down again, her decision made. The law speaks of honor earned through combat, but this human has shown me a different kind of honor. He had the courage to choose vulnerability over violence. Jake watched as the princess struggled with concepts that had no place in her warrior culture. He could see the conflict in her eyes, the battle between everything she had been taught, and the new understanding that his embrace had awakened. What are you saying? High Commander Zethkar demanded. Princess Veltara looked directly at Jake, her crystalline skin now showing steady, warm colors that seemed to pulse with inner light. I am saying that this human has defeated me without striking a single blow. He has shown me that there are forms of strength I never knew existed. The arena fell silent again as the implications of her words sank in. The princess was acknowledging defeat, but not in the way anyone had expected. She was conceding that Jake had won the duel, but through mercy rather than violence. This is unprecedented, High Commander Zethkar said, his voice heavy with the weight of tradition. How can combat be resolved without a victor? Princess Veltara stepped closer to Jake, her eyes never leaving his face. There is a victor. Father, this human has conquered something that no warrior has ever defeated. He has conquered the need for conquest itself. The crowd was now in full debate, with voices rising throughout the arena. Some Zentari were angry at this departure from tradition, while others seemed intrigued by the philosophical implications of what they had witnessed. Jake realized that this moment would define not just his own fate, but the future relationship between humans and Zentari. The princess had recognized something in his action that went beyond their cultural differences. She had seen the possibility of a different way of resolving conflicts. As the debate continued around them, Princess Veltara made a decision that would change both their lives forever. She had been given a glimpse of a world where strength could be measured by compassion rather than combat, and she wanted to explore that possibility further. Princess Veltara stood in the center of the arena, her crystalline skin glowing with colors that no Zentari had ever seen before. The debate in the crowd was growing louder, with thousands of voices arguing about what had just happened. Some demanded that the duel continue according to ancient law, while others seemed fascinated by this new possibility they had witnessed. Jake remained still, his arms at his sides, waiting for the princess to make her decision. He could see the internal struggle playing out across her features, the battle between centuries of tradition and the new understanding that his embrace had awakened. Her father watched from the judge's position, his own skin flashing with confusion and anger. The princess raised her hand, and the crowd gradually fell silent. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly across the arena, reaching every corner of the massive structure. Her words would be remembered by every Zentari present for the rest of their lives. My people, she began, today we have witnessed something that challenges everything we thought we knew about strength and honor. This human has shown me that there are ways to resolve conflict that our ancestors never imagined. High Commander Zethkar stepped forward, his voice urgent. Daughter, you cannot abandon the ways of our people. The law is sacred. Honor must be maintained through combat. Princess Veltara looked at her father with love and respect, but also with newfound determination. Father, I have not abandoned our ways. I have discovered a new way to honor them. This human has defeated me more completely than any warrior ever could. The crowd erupted in confused voices, but the princess continued speaking, her voice growing stronger with each word. He defeated me without violence, conquered me without causing harm, and showed me strength that comes from choosing peace over war. Jake felt his heart racing as he realized what the princess was about to say. Her skin was now glowing with warm, steady colors that seemed to pulse with inner light. The transformation in her was complete and irreversible. "I propose," the princess announced, her voice ringing across the arena, "that instead of completing this duel through violence, we complete it through union. I ask Jake Morrison to be my partner, not just in ending this conflict, but in building a new kind of relationship between our peoples." The silence that followed was absolute. 20,000. Zentaris sat in stunned disbelief, processing words that had never been spoken in their history. A duel resolved through marriage was beyond their comprehension, yet they could see the logic in the princess's reasoning. Jake stared at the princess in amazement. He had hoped to survive the duel, perhaps even to salvage the diplomatic mission. He had never imagined that his instinctive embrace would lead to this moment. But as he looked into her eyes, he saw something that made his decision easy. "Princess Veltara," he said, his voice carrying across the silent arena, "I am honored by your proposal. If it will bring peace between our peoples and show both our cultures a new way to resolve conflicts, then I accept." The princess's skin burst into brilliant colors of joy and relief. She stepped forward and took Jake's hands in hers, her crystalline touch warm and gentle. "Then let this arena witness the first union between human and Zentari, sealed not by conquest but by choice." High Commander Zethkar looked as if he was about to object, but then he saw the expression on his daughter's face. The colors flowing across her skin showed a happiness he had never seen before. After a long moment, his own skin began to show the deep blue hues of acceptance. "If this is your choice, daughter," he said formally, "then it is the choice of our people. Let it be. Recorded that Princess Veltara and Commander Jake Morrison have resolved their conflict through union rather than violence." The crowd's reaction was unlike anything in Zentari history. Some voices rose in celebration, excited by this unprecedented development. Others remained confused, struggling to understand how their warrior culture could accommodate such a radical departure from tradition. But gradually, more and more voices joined in support of the princess's decision. Dr. Parker, Lieutenant Carter, and Captain Roberts rushed onto the arena floor, their faces showing amazement and relief. They had watched their commander face almost certain death, only to see him transform the situation into something miraculous. "Commander," Dr. Parker said, her voice filled with emotion, "what you've done here today will be studied for generations. You've shown that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our weapons, but our capacity for compassion." Lieutenant Carter was already working on his communication device, preparing to send word of these developments back to Earth. "This is going to change everything," he said excitedly. "The alliance we hope to build through negotiation, you've created through understanding." Captain Roberts looked around at the crowd of Zentari, their skin colors showing a spectrum of emotions from confusion to joy. "You've given them something new to think about, sir. They'll never look at conflict the same way again." Princess Veltara addressed the crowd once more, her voice confident and clear. "Today marks the beginning of a new era for our people. We have learned that strength can be gentle, that victory can be achieved through mercy, and that the greatest conquests are those that conquer hearts rather than bodies." High Commander Zethkar approached Jake and extended his hand in the traditional Zentari gesture of respect. "Commander Morrison, you have shown us something that our warriors have spent centuries trying to achieve. You have found a way to win, without causing your opponent to lose." Jake shook the offered hand, feeling the warm, crystal texture of Zentari skin. "High Commander, I think both our peoples have something to learn from each other. Your courage and honor combined with human compassion could create something powerful." Over the following days, the celebration of the unprecedented union between Jake and Princess Veltara became a planet-wide festival. Zentari from across the Confederation came to witness the couple, who had changed their understanding of strength and conflict resolution. The marriage ceremony itself was a blend of human and Zentari traditions, creating new customs that would be adopted by future generations. Jake wore traditional Zentari ceremonial armor alongside his human military decorations, while Princess Veltara incorporated symbols of peace from Earth into her crystal crown. The alliance between humans and Zentari became the strongest in the galaxy, built not on mutual fear or respect for each other's military power, but on the revolutionary idea that true strength came from the courage to be vulnerable. The story of their union spread to other worlds, inspiring new approaches to diplomacy and conflict resolution. Dr. Parker established the first joint human-Zentari research facility, where scientists from both cultures worked together on projects that neither could have accomplished alone. Lieutenant Carter became the head of a new communication center that facilitated understanding between dozens of different species. Captain Roberts founded a military academy that taught conflict resolution alongside combat tactics. Years later, when Jake and Princess Veltara had children who carried traits of both species, those children would grow up in a galaxy where an embrace was remembered as the most powerful weapon ever deployed. The simple human act of offering comfort in the face of anger had changed the course of interstellar relations forever. The arena where their duel had taken place was transformed into a monument to peaceful resolution, with the inscription recording that sometimes the greatest victories are achieved not by defeating others, but by choosing to care for them instead. Jake's unexpected hug had become the foundation of a new understanding that would influence conflicts across the stars for generations to come.